Getting to the heart of the matter. Back to Guy, Ben, and Frank with more Inside the News.
Welcome back to Inside the News. My name is Guy Wehman, Frank Vernuccio, and Ben Brunson. As you would have expected, these guys this week, meaning us three, they're going to be loaded for bear. And if you've been waiting to hear what we have to say, well, you've tuned into the right place, because we're dissecting it in ways that, we've been on the air for nearly 9 years now, I think. And this is show number 470. So you do the math, divide it out by 52, and that's how many years we've been on. All right, world reaction here, Frank. We've had some from the United Kingdom, China, Russia. What are they viewing us as? Frank, go.
Well, I think if you're sitting in Beijing or Moscow or perhaps Tehran, and you see a potential American president shot at, knocked down, bloodied, got up, waved his fist at the crowd and said, "Fight, fight, fight," I think you realize that you're going to have to deal with a whole different type of America if Donald Trump gets elected. For 4 years, they have pushed this country around like it's a 90-pound weakling. There's something called the Wolf Warriors of China, who in negotiations with the United States were blunt, were nasty, were abrasive, and had no respect at all for this country. Same thing from Tehran, same thing from Russia. Now they've got a president, a potential president, who doesn't mind getting shot at, who gets up and waves his fist in defiance. And I think they realize that this is a different America about to be born after this next presidential election. Hopefully this will stop a lot of the ongoing and I think very serious threats that the United States is currently facing. Let's take a look at it. The Chinese Navy has been coming perilously close to the shores of Alaska, and the Russian Navy has become perilously close to the shores of Florida. The fact is, the feeling that those leaders have in Moscow and Beijing is that the United States is a pushover. My deep concern right now is that in the remaining couple of months of the Biden administration, the leaders in Moscow, Tehran, and Beijing might believe this is the time to act. This is the time to press their advantage. They know they will not be able to do that after the Trump administration takes office. So we are in probably the most perilous 4 or 5 or 6 months that I think this nation has had pretty much since the end of the Cold War.
Ben, you looked at that picture, and that picture is going to be a part of the history books forever. And it almost looks like a Braveheart, Mel Gibson, the Patriot movie type of moment there. And it takes us back to the Revolutionary War with George Washington and all those other patriots that fought in that particular battle. And if I was Russia, if I was China, and I know I've already dealt with Trump 4 years already, so we already know what he's kind of like. He had dinner with Xi, and at the very same time, he was sending missiles over to the Middle East, and it's like, don't screw with us, okay? And that's the way Trump operates. It's like, you know what? If you kill anybody of our prisoners, guess what? I'm going to kill you. He said that to the people in Afghanistan. Don't mess with us. Ben, go.
Yeah, I look at that photo with the flag in the background, and it just very reminiscent. Reminds me immediately of the famous photo, and perhaps the most famous photo of World War II, which was the flag raising on Mount Suribachi and the invasion of Iwo Jima, the early days of that landing in 1945. And that is an iconic photo that will be around for a very, very long time in our history. And look, it does show us that Donald Trump is coming back loaded for bear. And I think if you really step back and you ponder that we could have had a different outcome 4 years ago, and Donald Trump would be ending his second term, no doubt having suffered the ongoing insurgency of the deep state as he suffered his first term nonstop. But if you really look at what America has learned in the intervening 4 years, what has come out, what people understand now, and it's no longer, stupid conspiracy theories by right-wing talk show hosts. It's reality. The massive insurgency run by the CIA and the FBI and others within government against Donald Trump. Donald Trump has learned a lot. What it means to me is that this second term of Donald Trump will be far, far more consequential and important than his first term. He's going to clean house on day one. I sincerely hope that's the case. I hope they have a list of 1,000 or more people that get fired day one going into the administration. And I hope they have a list of 1,000 patriots and constitutionalists ready to step in and take those jobs. And those are leadership positions throughout the deep state, in intel communities and law enforcement communities and the DOJ. There's a ton of house cleaning that has to go, and it has to be deep. This has to be deep surgery that goes on. And I think that's what we're in for. And I think the rest of the world knows it. And Frank's right. The next few months are so dangerous because you have a country being kicked around all over the world. There is zero respect for America right now. Zero. We're a laughingstock on the global stage. And, that makes it very, very dangerous. So I'm very concerned. But each day that goes by is a day closer to Donald Trump taking over. And that will serve as a deterrent, perhaps from Xi or someone else making a really stupid move. And we're talking primarily about a move on Taiwan. So hopefully nothing happens that serious. But I think Donald Trump's going to hit the ground running. He knows the players, he knows the reality, and more importantly, Americans know the reality of what happened during Trump's first term, and that will serve him quite well in these next 4 years.
All right, we're going to take another time out, and Frank wanted to weigh in on this, and we've got so much more to talk about. We could go on for hours, but we want to thank you so much for joining us this week on Inside the News. Frank Vernuccio, he's with the American Analysis of News and Media. You can find him at usagovpolicy.com. Ben Brunson, the author of The Falstaff Enigma and Esther Sling. You can find Ben at benbrunson.com, amazon.com. We want to thank all of our affiliates on down the line. Thank you so much for sticking with us for these 9 years. And you do mean the world to us. And you, the listeners, thank you so much for supporting us as well. We're going to take a time out. When we get back, Eileen Cannon, the documents case. Oh, my goodness. Is this a game changer? Well, maybe it is. Inside the News, we're going to take a time out. We'll be back.
You're listening to Wehman, Brunson, and Vernuccio, Inside the News. Here's Guy, Ben, and Frank.
Welcome back to our third segment of Inside the News. Glad to have you with us. Ben Brunson, Frank Vernuccio. My name is Guy Wehman. Okay, Frank, the legal here, and Eileen Cannon. She was in charge of the documents case. That's the Mar-a-Lago raid. And she's determined that, Jack Smith was unconstitutionally appointed to that position, and she dismissed the whole case. Frank, go.
Yeah, what a shocker in the year 2024, a judge who actually follows the law and the Constitution. Amazing. One of the common threads of the case in Florida, the case in Georgia, the case in New York has been two items. One, if it was not Donald Trump, no one would have brought the case. And number two, precedent and black letter law were both universally ignored in the processing of the legal procedure. Eileen Cannon took a look at what was considered at first a long shot by the Trump defense team, but upon closer examination, Judge Cannon decided that, in fact, it was appropriate. This is a direct attack on the Democrat use of lawfare against their political opponents. And it's going to have, I think, significant ramifications. Law, as you know, is based on precedent, as well as what's written down in the law books. And the precedent of using the Department of Justice to harass political opponents is going to be, I think, more in the spotlight than ever before, thanks to what Judge Cannon has done. This case never should have been brought. It was brought by someone who was unlawfully appointed outside of the normal procedure, in violation of normal procedure, and Judge Cannon issued the right decision. But it's going to have a larger impact. Judges in the future, I think, will feel more confident in stating that you simply can't bring a case because you don't like a candidate or you don't like a guy or you don't like an organization. And I think it opens up that lawfare question a lot larger than it's ever been opened before. 3 cheers for Judge Kennan.
Okay, Ben, he was just a normal American citizen. He was not a U.S. attorney. And there's the distinction there. And that's part of the distinction that Eileen Cannon made in this argument.
Yeah, I think Eileen Cannon kind of fast forwarded to a decision that likely would have come out of the Supreme Court had it gotten that far. And so you could argue from a matter of jurisprudence whether that's the right move for her to make, but it does put the onus now on the government in their appeal to disprove her ruling. And essentially, she has decided that 2 things she cited in a very long 93-page ruling. One, that it was an unconstitutional appointment of Jack Smith, and 2, that the funding by the DOJ of Jack Smith's prosecution has not been properly authorized by Congress. So she cited 2 things for the basis of dismissing the case. The government has indicated that it will appeal. I think in any event, the practical meaning of this is that this case is dead as far as Donald Trump is concerned, because he will take the presidency long before any appeal gets adjudicated, in my opinion. Now, there is another case that Jack Smith has pending in the DC federal court against Donald Trump. So this, however, the Florida case was the case in which the left thought they had the strongest legal standing. I think we all expect that the 2 cases in New York for which Donald Trump has been convicted, one by fiat of the judge, both of those cases will ultimately be tossed out because they have no legal merit whatsoever. They're horrible cases. So
yeah, the ones in New York have reversible error, is what they say here, Frank, right?
Yeah. The Judiciary Committee of Congress held a hearing. Judge John Wilson, a retired judge, testified at the hearing, and he went into great detail of how the New York case violated just about every code of judicial conduct, every code of how to proceed in a case, rules of evidence, and so forth. One of the things that's a standard in any case, whether it's a criminal case involving robbing a bodega or doing what Trump was alleged to have done, is prejudicial evidence and prejudicial testimony. And certainly bringing Stormy Daniels to testify in this case, the prejudicial impact of that was so far above any good effect of her testimony in terms of what it contributed to the case was ridiculous. This is a case, if you look at the way it was processed, a first-year law student would have flunked a moot court case, a moot court course in the way they proceeded. And yet, with the judge so biased against Donald Trump and a lawfare system so pushed by this administration, it went forward and resulted in a conviction, which inevitably will be overturned.
You know, we've got now an appointed person, someone selected, I guess is a better way of saying it, of J.D. Vance. He's, the vice presidential candidate here. And there's so many cool things here about this, Ben. But one of the things I think is cool is that he's a Marine. And he's got that military background. And we have not seen someone with a military background in that office or in those positions in quite some time, Ben.
Yeah, he was a Marine. He went downrange to Iraq during the Iraq invasion in 2003, 2004. So he had a good service record. And he has an impressive background. Went to Ohio State after the Marines, graduated, I think, summa cum laude, went to Yale Law School, got a law degree. And his Yale law professor is the one who urged him to write his personal memoirs. And of course, that became the best-selling book, The Hillbilly Elegy. I think I pronounced that right, which is really about his personal upbringing with a family that had Kentucky roots and kind of an Appalachian feel to it, if you will. So he's come a long way. I I was kind of hoping he might pick Byron Donalds. Personally, that was my choice because I thought there was a great chance to really cleave the black vote back to the Republican Party. And if you look at history, of course, blacks through the 19th century and early 20th century always voted Republican because it was the Democrats who ran the KKK and ran the slave plantations and everything else. And it was the Republicans who freed, of course, Abraham Lincoln freeing the slaves and emancipation. That changed in the mid 20th century and kind of solidified the black vote for Democrats under Lyndon Johnson. And I think Donald Trump has a real opportunity to switch that back, and maybe an opportunity kind of a little missed with J.D. Vance.
All right, Frank, J.D. Vance, go.
It's a pronouncement of the Republican Party's new position, I think. The Republican Party is now trying to take over what was once the Democratic Party's position as the majority party in the country. J.D. Vance represents blue-collar Americans, represents, I think, rank-and-file middle-class Americans. And while I happen to agree with Ben about the selection, I do understand what it entails and what he's intending to do. Pair that with the fact that the first time in Republican history, a Teamsters president addressed a Republican convention, and you get to see what the strategy is all about.
All right, we're going to talk more about the Teamsters address in our next one on Picking Up the Pieces. Thank you so much, Frank, for that tease. That's excellent. This is Wehman Brunson Vernuccio Inside the News. We're going to take a time out. We will be back.
You're listening to Wehman Brunson and Vernuccio Inside the News.